A medical doctor from Missouri has some killer information that would, and I quote, completely dismantle evolution, as proclaimed on the YouTube channel Standing for Truth. Apparently, Carl Werner here believes the situation is so bad that he thinks all museums all over the world should be closed until they fixed what he claims to have uncovered.
All the natural history museums of the world need to close their dinosaur halls. And if they refuse, local governments should defund these museums until they fix their false and misleading dinosaur displays.
Wow. Those are some really draconian measures. This must be really serious. And it sounds like he knows what he's talking about. Just listen to this.
Dr. Werner read and researched every topic he could find on evolution, including paleontology, geology, biology, and biochemistry.
So, could we be onto something? Let's find out, shall we? For decades, Carl Werner has been working towards his revelations.
After 18 years of study, over the next nearly 3 decades, Dr. Werner then traveled to museums and dig sites around the globe, photographing thousands of original fossils and the actual fossil layers where they were found.
So he was basically trying to do what any ordinary researcher of paleontology does all the time, except that instead of going to the actual collections where all the important specimens are stored, he only takes pictures of whatever's displayed in the exhibits. Which is really weird. Exhibits are meant for the general public and only show a fraction of what the museum has in store. The real goodies are behind the scenes. It doesn't spell very good for the depth of his investigation that Werner's understanding of museums does not go beyond the level of that of a regular visitor. But before talking about the actual evidence that he claims to have found, Carl Werner first starts off with a moral story for making a big point about the sin of omission, equating not telling the whole truth about fossil evidence with negligent homicide.
Scientists commit these same types of crimes. They do omissions, and that's leaving out the most important facts, which can be as serious a crime as committing an overt fossil fraud.
Yeah, we'll get back to that bit. So, what crucial life-saving information have museums been omitting? What impressions are they trying to give to the general public that is so offensive Werner wants to shut them all down until they bow to his will?
The fact of the matter that all of the animals and plants changed from the time of the dinosaurs until now proves evolution to be true, or so I thought.
All of the plants and animals? No. No scientist or anyone with a good understanding of the history of life on Earth has ever claimed that all organisms are always changing significantly all the time. On the contrary, it is a very well-known fact that stasis, that is a lineage of creatures remaining essentially unchanged over long stretches of time, is very, very common. And this makes sense, because if it ain't broke, why try to fix it? And if anyone knows about evolutionary stasis, it's famed paleontologist and science educator, the late Stephen Jay Gould. He already pointed this out long ago in a very simple but visually striking way. Most of the biomass on Earth has remained on the level of simple microbes, and this situation has barely changed over billions of years. Likewise, 500 million years ago we already had jellyfish. We still have jellyfish. 400 million years ago we had nautiluses and coelacanths. We still have those around. This evolutionary stasis is not some well-kept secret, but a very well-known fact of life. The bulk of life has a tendency to remain unchanged, and the evolution of larger and more complex forms happens at the fringes, so to speak. And being more vulnerable, any larger, more complex life forms are also more prone to be replaced all the time. That covers a lot of change we are witnessing in the fossil record. We used to have dinosaurs, and now we have large mammals instead. But at the same time as the dinosaurs, we already had many modern plants and also certain kinds of animals, though usually the smaller ones like insects and such. Point in case,
During the time of the dinosaurs, the age of the dinosaurs, were the animals the same as today, or were the animals and plants unfamiliar? During the time of the dinosaurs, you'd see flying reptiles. We don't have flying reptiles today like pterosaurs. You'd see reptiles in the ocean. We don't have reptiles in the ocean today like mosasaurs and plesiosaurs. And on the land, you'd find dinosaurs, but it would be an unfamiliar scene according to this first museum display, which again suggests that evolution is true. Everything changed.
Where does it say everything has changed? An unfamiliar scene does not mean everything has changed. It only means some things have changed. That ought to be pretty obvious if you speak and understand the English language. Whenever you change the scene of a theater play, you usually only replace some of the props. Same here. And it is even mentioned what has changed to evoke this sense of unfamiliarity. Yeah, so the presence of all these now extinct creatures and the absence of corresponding creatures of mammalian stock known from modern times, like whales, bats, horses, cattle, is what makes the scene unfamiliar. Not everything, just the more eye-catching things. If we were to go back to a living room in the Middle Ages, it would also be an unfamiliar scene. There would be things we are familiar with in modern times like walls, windows and furniture, though the style would be different. And there will be things that no longer are in a modern living room like oil lamps and an open fireplace with a cauldron over it. We would, on the other hand, not find things we are familiar with nowadays like electric lighting, an induction stove and a television set. That is all they're trying to say. Some things are different and it's these exact things, dinosaurs, pterosaurs, plesiosaurs, mosasaurs, all of which we nowadays don't have anymore. Carl Werner is trying to read more into this than is actually being written. Now, why is that?
I want you to write down in the comment section all the modern plants and animals that you see in this display.
Well, there's not much going on here other than the dinosaurs themselves and some trees at the horizon. By the way, did you notice those, Carl? They look like conifer trees, probably pine, because that genus is known to go all the way back to the Jurassic. What else?
And I want you to note what modern animals and plants do you see that you're sure of that's a modern plant or animal?
Again, pine trees. Very clear for everyone to see. What more?
And here's one from the Dinosaur National Monument. What definite modern animals and plants do you see in this display?
Horsetails, ferns.
And here at the Sam Noble Museum of Natural History in Oklahoma, besides these three extinct animals, what modern animals and plants do you see in this diorama?
That's not a diorama, it's just a painting. Anyways, pine trees, cycads, ferns. This is not very challenging at all.
And here is another one from the Sam Noble. Do you see any modern plants or animals in this display?
I see ferns, tree ferns, conifers, flowering plants.
There might be a flower down here,
Yeah.
but I don't know what kind of flower that is.
You don't? Well, maybe you should have done what this Google Maps user did and taken a closer picture of the display's information panels that lists the names of the different plants and animals. Apparently, it's a magnolia and a sacred lotus, both the exact same genus as modern-day ones. You're welcome, Carl.
And in this display, what modern animals and plants do you see?
There is a ginkgo tree on the right there, Carl.
They pointed out that this is a ginkgo tree,
Yeah.
but it's not the modern ginkgo tree. It's a different species.
So what if it's a different species? Species are relatively arbitrary categorizations, especially when it comes to fossils. What are even the differences between this and a modern-day ginkgo tree? Can you tell us that? Because if it's essentially the same kind of creature, then that undermines the whole point of everything having changed. Evolutionary stasis is right there on display and it's being hand-waved away. Not cool, Carl.
And in this display, what modern plants and animals can can you see that you say, oh, I'm sure of it, that's a modern animal or plant? Well, there's kind of a crocodilian down here. I don't know if you would know that that's modern or not. That's kind of hard to see. There is a turtle way over here. That might be modern, but that's pretty much it.
How can you point out examples of stasis and then pretend they don't count? Of course these count, and they undermine the whole point. And especially since this display is clearly very dated, perhaps even as old as half a century. That underlines that stasis hasn't been kept a secret ever. It's always been out in the open.
And out of these plants and animals, can you say for sure that these are modern animals or plants? And which ones are they?
There's a cycad smack in the middle there, Carl.
Now, there is a cycad here. I want to point out the cycads are alive today down in Louisiana, but this is a different species. The cycads during the time of the dinosaurs were a different species than today's. So I wouldn't include those.
Oh, we wouldn't want that. That would undermine the whole point. How convenient. Omitting facts like that. Are you sure you're not committing a sin of omission yourself there, Carl? Listen, if the Mesozoic cycad is not significantly different from the modern day cycad, then it essentially hasn't changed and is yet another example of the evolutionary stasis that you claim is being kept from the public. Clearly it is not. Creationists are okay with lumping species together into kinds and treating them as the same thing, but only when it fits their narrative. Otherwise, kinds are out of the window apparently. That is a flagrant double standard. And this double standard is the crux of Werner's main examples of living fossils that supposedly don't fit the evolutionary picture.
If creation was true, and if all the animals and plants during the Noah's flood were then mixed up in a flood and then fell to the bottom, you should find some animals that are modern next to the dinosaurs.
Which you do, but never to the extent that it doesn't fit the evolutionary picture. And it certainly doesn't look like a random jumble as the result of a biblical flood. For instance, you will never find modern-looking crabs in the Cambrian together with trilobites. Decapod crabs evolved later and have an anatomy that is more derived than in trilobites. What you do see is that when lineages do finally show up in the fossil records, they can remain essentially unchanged for millions of years up to modern days, unless they go extinct.
And yet we went from museum to museum, dinosaur dig site to dinosaur dig site. And when we asked this question, did you find any modern species of animals or plants in your dinosaur dig site? The answer was uniformly no. There are no modern animals or plant species in the dinosaur layers. Some of them kind of look modern, but they always had different species.
Again, it doesn't matter if they're different species. If it's the same genus or family, then that means it's essentially the same kind of creature.
And this is a fossil that would ultimately be the reason why all dinosaur halls need to be closed and defunded until they fix the problem.
How can they fix the problem if you defund them, Carl?
This fossil was found in a dinosaur rock layer, but if you look at the species name, the modern Nautilus is Nautilus pompilius. But the fossil Nautilus found next to a dinosaur, it's not Nautilus pompilius, it's Cynoceras texanum.
No, not Cynoceras, but Cymatoceras. It's in your own caption. Also, Comic Sans? Really?
See, it's a different genus, it's a different species, and it's not the same animal. So I thought. But then I came upon another Nautilus, and this one allowed me to basically take a microscope and look inside. It's not really a microscope, but...
So it's a proverbial microscope, not a real one. You did not look at any details now, did you?
This one is also a Nautilus that was found during the dinosaur rock layers, in the dinosaur rock layers. This fossil lived with the dinosaurs. This animal lived with the dinosaurs. It was buried alongside a dinosaur.
What is it, Carl? Did they live at the time of the dinosaurs, or were they buried with them? It's either or. What's with this Freudian slipperiness? Don't you really believe in what you're saying yourself?
But at the Australian Museum, when they took a saw and cut it in half so I could see the inside. And that's the part that was always missing.
Well, then why did you not look into the actual collections of the museums you were visiting? There are plenty of cross-sections of Nautilus to be found there. If you only restrict yourself to the exhibits, you won't get a lot of information.
Because I could never confirm that they were right, that it's a different genus and all this.
Yeah, like you wrote here. I assumed the fossil must have had some unusual internal anatomy that I simply could not see. You should have either have stuck with that gut feeling or looked up the scientific literature to find the diagnostic criteria and understand what the distinction is.
Now, if you look at a modern Nautilus cut in half, you can see what's called the siphuncle.
Siphuncle.
Which is that tube that allows them to balance the air in the chambers. You can't see the siphuncle.
Siphuncle.
But you can see where where it goes through here. But in the dinosaur one, you can actually see the siphuncle.
Siphuncle!
All the way to the center. And if you look at these, they are essentially an exact match.
Essentially an exact match? What does that mean? They are either an exact match or they are essentially the same kind of animal. Can't be both. Exactly the same or essentially the same. Which is it?
But watch this. The modern Nautilus is Nautilus pompilius. But this one, even though it looks exactly the same.
Exactly the same or essentially the same.
They put it in a different genus and call it Cenoceras and a different species, Lineatus. It's the same animal and they changed the name. And why would you change the name? Who knows?
Who knows? I, for one, know. Because unlike you, I looked up the original description of Cenoceras in the scientific literature. And this goes all the way back to 1883, where American paleontologist Alpheus Hyatt published his work on fossil cephalopods in the Proceedings of the Boston Society of Natural History. And there it is, the complete original description and the reasoning behind creating the new genus of Cenoceras. Let's take the first and foremost of these diagnostic criteria. Nomoloidal siphons. What does that mean? It means that the siphuncle looks like a series of flattened spheres. The spheres are thought to be reminiscent of nomolites, which are a kind of macroscopic foraminiferan algae, often found as fossils, either as loose elements or in cross-sections. You can kind of see it in the screenshot here of the page in Werner's book, but it's much clearer to see in this specimen over here. The siphuncle is very clearly a series of bulbous discs. Compare this to the siphuncle of a modern-day Nautilus, which is just a narrow tube. This is not some tiny detail that is hard to see, and you certainly don't need a microscope for it. Hyatt lists many more diagnostic characters to distinguish Cenoceras, and right below it, not only do we find the original diagnosis for Cymetoceras as well, we can even directly compare both of these to Hyatt's diagnosis of fossils of the genus Nautilus itself. And as you can see, it is stated to have a tubular siphuncle instead. If Carl Werner really wanted to know what distinguishes these forms from each other, all he needed to do is read the scientific literature. You know, like actual scientists do. Now there's a whole lot more to this, of course. There's a long taxonomic history where the experts discuss different diagnostic characteristics of Nautilus, like the precise placement of the siphuncle and different growth stages. It can get quite sophisticated. A lot of general distinctions are made on the basis of exact measurements of the shape and the geometry of the shell. Nautilus shells are perfectly circular in contrast with Cenoceras shells that appear more compressed. The photos Werner used were shot at an angle, obfuscating these distinctions and making the shells look more alike than they actually do. That's rather misleading now, don't you think?
But what it does is it creates the illusion of evolution.
If these existed today side by side, without a doubt, creationists would consider them to be the same kind of animal, given these minor differences in anatomy and morphology.
See, unless you got 27 years to run around the world taking photographs of both live and fossilized animals and lay them next to each other, you ain't gonna ever figure this out.
Yeah, you're a very special boy, Carl. I have just disproven you without even leaving my room. There's so much information you can find online nowadays, and they include scientific articles with descriptions and photos and illustrations for everyone to see, including you. And traveling the world and making pictures of specimens is what actual paleontologists do all the time. And they go a bit further than Carl here, because they access the actual collections instead of just whatever's displayed in the exhibits. And they also look at all the details, often with an actual microscope instead of a proverbial one.
I'm just going to show you modern animals that were found next to dinosaurs. So this is a dinosaur era fossil, and it looks like the modern dragonfly. But look what they did to the species and genus name. This should be the same genus at least, and probably should just be the same genus and species.
According to you? On the basis of what diagnostic criteria, Carl? Which ones? Be specific.
The modern dragonfly is Pachydipax longipennis, but they changed it for the fossil. Do you see how deceptive that is?
Oh, let me show you how it's done. Okay, let's go look on the trusty old paleobiology database online here. We just start typing the binomial name. Ah, there it is. Urogomphus giganteus. The species was originally described by Gamma in 1839 in Die versteinerten Insekten Solenhovens. Now note that this was published several decades before Darwin's Origin of Species came out, so it's already a bit of a stretch to assume any Darwinian motives of the author here. Let's look at the details. So, it was originally placed in the genus Aishna and then reassigned to different genera over the following decades until it finally landed in Urogomphus according to Handliers, and this placement was confirmed by subsequent authors during the 20th century. Well, let's see what Handliers has to say about it. Let's search for that publication online. Ah, fantastic. The PDF is right here. Okay, let's look for the genus and species diagnosis. Alright, it says, in this genus I united several forms with more slender wings that, however, with regards to innervation, remarkably resemble Aishnidium. They are usually species of considerable size. They are in fact quite big, with a wingspan of up to 9.5 centimeters, which makes them twice as large as the blue dasher, Pachydiplax longipennis, that Carl Werner compared it with. Other than that, it's a bit meager, so let's see what subsequent authors determined. There is Carpenter in 1932. And here's the PDF online. Thank you, Biodiversity Heritage Library. Looking for Urogomphus. Ah, It's been previously known from very poor specimens, but in the Carnegie Museum there is an excellent one showing a lot more details. And these are the diagnostic criteria. And a nice illustration for you to compare with other species. Now, this diagnosis is a bit dated, but luckily the genus and species were revised by Beckley in 1996, as you can read about here. This is the new formal diagnosis of the genus of Urogumphus. And this is the new formal diagnosis of its species Giganteus, with all the characteristics that makes this species distinct from other species. Have at it. Now, why did Carl Werner put this fossil species side by side with the one dragonfly species that doesn't even come close to it in size, characteristics, and geography? I think we can find a clue here.
The modern dragonfly is Pachydipax longipennis.
The modern dragonfly? Apparently, Carl Werner here thinks there's only a single species of dragonfly in the entire world. There are, in fact, over 3,000 species of dragonfly. The blue dasher lives in North America, not Germany, is half the size and belongs to an entirely different family with different features. There's obviously no deception in assuming that any random fossil creature you find is a different species from the thousands of other options, especially if that creature has its own characteristics. It's only the species when you can prove that it's the same species by looking at the details, which Carl Werner did not.
Now look at this katydid, the modern katydid, the fossil katydid. If you just look at this step by step, here's the leg, it's a different position. The antennae are up and these are going out sideways, but the wings the same. This looks the same.
This is called an ovipositor, Carl. My goodness, it's got legs and antennae and wings. Therefore, it must be the same. Carl Werner has just discovered that members of the order Orthoptera, which includes crickets, grasshoppers, and their relatives, all kind of look similar. Whoa! Except when you start looking at the actual details, the differences spring forward. I mean, the leg of the katydid here is at least twice as long as the fossil one here. When you compare a line drawing of a different specimen of Pycnophlebia robusta, you can also clearly see how the wing has a different shape. The eyes are much bigger, the ovipositor of the katydid is curved instead of straight, etc., etc. And that is because this species is not even in the same family as katydids. Pycnophlebia here was assigned to the family of Prophalangopsidae, which, by the way, is still extant today. Instead of a katydid, he could have just picked a modern Prophalangopsis species like this one. Look at how much more similar these are to each other. He's even doing a bad job at picking the right modern species to compare to the fossil ones.
The water skaters look the same and are renamed. The water bugs look the same and are renamed. Different genus names. Are you kidding me?
Who's kidding here, Carl? You can't just go squint at a vague picture of a single specimen in an exhibit and outright claim, yup, they're the same. You have to look at the anatomical and morphological details of several specimens, sometimes with an actual microscope instead of a proverbial one. And then you look up the scientific works that enumerate these details as diagnostic criteria. And I'm not even gonna bother picking these apart. The whole point is moot anyway. Even for his own sake, Carl Werner is completely unnecessarily hung up on different species being erected for very similar creatures. If he wanted to point out evolutionary stasis, then there's no need to gripe about the specific taxonomy. He could just highlight examples of clearly related creatures that barely changed over the aeons, despite the fact that they're different species differing in many details. Not that it matters. Carl Werner should pay closer attention to what is actually displayed in museums, what is written in publications, even for the general public, and what is shown in documentaries. There are evolutionarily conserved organisms mentioned and shown everywhere. It's no secret and there's no cover-up. It's all out in the open. And that's because no one with a proper understanding of evolutionary history is at all bothered by lineages of creatures that, once appearing in the fossil record, remain pretty much the same. And this especially goes for plants and invertebrates like insects, crustaceans, and mollusks. But even things like certain kinds of fishes, lizards, turtles, and crocodiles, which we know to have ancient origins, often preceding the heyday of the dinosaurs. We're used to and completely fine with their presence in ancient layers as well as modern times, as long as they fit the overall picture. Now this video is already long enough, so I'm gonna cut it off here and continue another time. In the next video we'll look at what Werner claims to have uncovered about fossils of amniotes, that is, reptiles, birds and mammals. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and maybe even a sub if you haven't already. I've got plenty more evolution related content like my Alien Biosphere series. Thanks for sticking around. Until next time, stay sharp and stay evolved.